Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount podcast. My name is Shogun. Joining me today are many of my good friends, but the topic expert today, subject matter expert, is my good friend Tio. And the subject is going to be the Urantia Book, which is, really fascinating, very long book that has very mysterious origins and, tells us about the universe, God, and pretty much everything, Jesus and everything else. So we're going to dive into that, and it is really a fascinating topic. But make sure you join the Temple Mount Discord server. And at the top of the Temple Mount Discord server, you're going to find our Roundtable podcast on SoundCloud and on YouTube, as well as our Temple Mount podcast on the same platform. So make sure you follow, subscribe to those. That being said, welcome, Tios, my friend. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Shogun.
Thanks so much for joining me again. So the Urantia Book, can you just give people an introduction for anyone who's never heard of it? How would you introduce them to it?
Sure. So, the first thing I would do is I'm just going to give a short little a reading off of the Wikipedia here, just a couple sentences, because I think it really sums it up the best as far as what I heard about the book when I was a young man, before Wikipedia was around. And I think they've kind of captured the narrative that I think anyone I've heard talking about it on YouTube or in different podcasts, they've kind of subscribed to this same idea as well, with varying angles on it. But here we go. So the book was first published in 1955. But as early as 1911, William S. Sadler and his wife, Elena Sadler, physicians in Chicago, and well known to the community, are said to have been approached by a neighbor who was concerned about her sleeping husband. She would occasionally find her husband in a deep sleep and breathing abnormally. She reported that she was unable to wake him at these times. The Sadlers came to observe the episodes, and over time the individual produced verbal communications that claimed to be spiritual beings. This changed sometime in early 1925 with a voluminous handwritten document, which from then on became the regular method of purported communication between the individuals. The individual was never identified publicly, but has been described as a hard-boiled businessman and member of the Board and Trade Stock Exchange. The Sadlers were both respected physicians, and William Sadler was sometimes debunker of paranormal claims. In 1929, he published a book called The Mind at Mischief, in which he explained the fraudulent methods of mediums and how self-deception leads to psychic claims. So here you have, just in case you didn't catch it there, the summary is you have these two doctors who are psychologists working area, and they get contacted by a wife who's concerned about her husband. And the angle is that the man who was, when he was sleeping, would just begin talking and would have no memory of the channeled communication when he would wake up. And at first, then Sadler was very, what would you say, skeptical of the encounter, but after he saw the difference in the writings that were coming out and between the sleeping patient, he started to document it. And once between 1911 and 1923, they started a committee where they gathered all these papers up, and somewhere between that time and 1955, it was published for free. It was just like, here you go, everybody. So it's a very interesting, I think, anomaly amongst publishing books. It's 2,000 pages long. And it covers subjects all the way from the nature of God to the development of sin and or of magic and charms, of all the way to the Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. So it's a very vast catalog of information. So to try to summarize it in any way is kind of is a very laboring task, because it does not waste any time. For my analysis of reading the book, it was like reading something that had it was like reading something written by someone who had never spoken not just the English language conversationally, but the human language conversationally. And they make that point in the beginning of the book. We are not used to communicating with word symbols. So here we go. That's kind of how they start it. And it's a great read.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, and I agree. And I've only just begun to scratch the surface. I became aware of it when I was probably like 14 or something like that, and I read a little, just skimmed it and got a sense of it a bit, but unfortunately, I didn't dive into it then, for whatever reason, right? But even though I was interested in it. But having dived into it even briefly, I mean, my initial impression is, first of all, the linguistic skill of the person who's writing it, although you're right, it seems kind of like somebody who's not normally communicating in human language in a way, but so it's kind of autistic almost in the sense of being like, I don't know if that's probably not the right word that I mean, but it's like I don't know, never, just going to take my foot out of my mouth on that one. But regardless, it's genius, like the way it's written. Like it's just at a very high verbal and linguistic level, right? So whoever wrote it was definitely highly, highly intelligent, really, really good grasp of that. And the other thing that struck me is the very strange way in which it seems perfectly coherent with biblical theology to me. So all of these elaborations it was giving about theological concepts like God and stuff just rang completely true to me based on my understanding of theology. And it really did seem to be almost like an exegesis of the Bible. So exegesis is when you're explaining the Bible or elaborating it. It really is like a super huge, what I saw so far is like a super huge biblical exegesis, like explaining all these concepts in detail. And it also seemed like a modernization of the biblical message in the sense of, for our modern times with our new level of understanding, this is kind of like the Bible that we would expect to get now for our current level of understanding. And that's only having just barely scratched the surface of it. And I'm not at this point saying I can say it's true or not, or that it's valid or not. I'm just saying that unlike most channeled stuff that I've listened to, it doesn't set up my bullshit detector where I'm like, this is just made up new age type stuff. And it also doesn't trigger my like, this is maybe like satanic or misleading or just something like that type thing. So that's just my first impression. And what I do want to commit to doing is, start like a regular listen together on the server, right? Where we just listen to one chapter at a time because it's huge and we can easily play it on the bot. And just do like one chapter a day or whatever as a group for anyone who's interested would be cool. And we can talk about it more. But sorry, I shouldn't have monologued like that. So you've read the entire thing, is that correct?
Yeah, a couple times.
Great. So we have an expert then, because I think it's 500 pages. It's like that thick. So that's a big study to go through more than once. So
it's 2,000 pages long.
Yeah, that's more accurate.
That's insane.
That's impressive. So that being said, like, I don't even really know where to start in terms of asking you about your experience with it, right? Like I gave my little monologue. What was your journey of like reading it, and like how did you initially understand it, and how did you come to understand what you were reading? In other words, what I'm asking is like, what is your take on it now? Like, what do you think it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that understanding, who I am as a person, encountering the book does definitely add a little bit to your understanding of how I'm going to perceive it. So I was what you might consider an Arianist, like a oneness God. Well, there's only one God, the God of Abraham, and I wasn't traditionally Jewish, but I considered myself probably that was as close to anything I could understand, the God of Abraham. And so when I encountered the Bible at 17, I had been pretty anti-Christian for a long time, as far as that I thought that Christians had placed Jesus before God, and I had this massive complex in my mind. So I pick up this 2,000-page book, and I become so enamored by the front part of the book, the first 1,000 pages. It blew my mind. The concepts, the world that it established, the fact that it made you zoom out away from Earth on a level that nothing else I had ever encountered did, and that it seemed to have dripped into the consciousness, like I said, 1911, 1923, between that time. And then you see its effect, I think, because humans, or people, we tend to and I say humans because we're looking at it from the book of from the Urantia book. That's kind of how they talk in the book, humans and Earth and all this, yeah. But people, we can only really enjoy things we have a conceptual capacity for. It comes out of our imagination, but only to certain degrees away from our reality. So this book comes in at 1911, 1929, and really with some sci-fi space type stuff that's not really on the scene. You don't see it. And for me, that was really interesting to see, not just that it was completely fleshed out, and that it was well before, I think, science fiction had ever become popularized, right? And so you have this entire universe of hierarchy, of order, of function, of activity, of purpose that's designed in this massive 1,000-page book. And then as you turn the page from this, it comes to Earth, right? And you start reading about the evolution of our species, the development of the planets, how everything in the solar systems and all around the galaxy is working. It just makes perfect sense. Everything lines up. You turn the page and it says the life and death of Jesus Christ. And I, at 18 years old, literally threw the book across the room, like, they got me! I am 1,000 pages into this book, and I'm just thinking, they're trying to convert me, these Christians are trying to get me again, and I put it down. And it took me about 6 months, and I just finally came back to it. When I started reading, it wasn't anything that I expected. It was a totally different angle that I wasn't prepared for on Jesus' life on Earth. And it had a way for me to connect, I think, with Jesus and his life and his teachings without having to break my whole, 18, 19-year-old ideology at the time, And I think about 27 years old, I had, or maybe 20 and 29 years old, I had another encounter spiritually that messed me up. So I went back to the Urantia book, and I picked it up, and I said, wow, it just, something grabbed me about it again. And I don't think that there's anything like it. When you hear preachers talk, when you hear teachers talk, spiritual teachers talk, it establishes, just telling you what draws me to it, it establishes a universe that has purpose. That not just gives the universe around you structure and purpose, but it gives your individual life purpose and meaning. And it does it in such a clearly precise, no mistaking about it, right, of what it is. And it's about your personality surviving. And it brings into life a concept that's like the, it's called your, oh, Lord help me now. It's basically like your conscious. And I forget the word now, and I'm not going to go Google, I'm not going to pull up the Urantia book to say it, but it's your, because it'll come to me. But each person at a certain age has their guide, their spiritual conscious come to them, right? And now they become aware of it, and you start having a relationship with this being that's on the outside of you. And here's the relationship. The being is depending on you for experience, right? So you are experiencing everything. So it's observing and is part of this, right? But you are depending on this being that's on you to become one with you, so that way when you die, there's somewhere for you to go, right? And that's what saves your personality. That's the Urantia book's definition of death. So you and your higher self end up eventually becoming one person that abandons the flesh and the material world. So when you apply that to Jesus' teachings about we are not of this world, we will leave this world behind, and he's starting to prepare the personality and the mind to leave the flesh behind, to leave, our worldly endeavors behind. That's about personality survival. And I think that's just there's nothing else that talks about it in that way.
Very interesting. So if someone were to study it, you recommend just pick it up or listen to it from cover to cover, beginning to end in sequence? Is that the best way to get started with it? I mean, it's obviously, I would assume that's the best way, but I mean, that's how you go about learning about it, just read the whole thing?
I think a lot of people might make the mistake if they read it online to skip the foreword. And the foreword is quite extensive, and it's explaining new verbiage and new terminology that is not inside the human intellect, that is not part of your reality. So, just for instance, absonite, right? Absonite is a word that the Urantia book comes up with and has to coin in order to explain to you something that's an absolute truth throughout all facets of time. It's an absonite truth. It has levels of truth, right?
I like that. Abstinate.
So begin at the foreword. Read the foreword, and I think if you read the foreword, and I personally read any book from the beginning to the end. That's what I think, and wait till you get to the end to give it your argument. And I honestly find myself going back to the final paper. It's a collection of 196 papers, including the foreword. Okay, so this 196 papers is extensive in its topics and how far it'll shift. So you might have a time where you're feeling like listening about the nature of God, and you're in that kind of outer realm of thinking. And you might have another time where you want to think about the nature of the 12 apostles, and it has a chapter on both where it breaks down what was different about each man in the 12 apostles. And I think it's just an amazingly free book, and it's written from the book of celestial observers. So that's such a great perspective. It's exciting. You know what I mean? It's exciting to think that if it be true, it is written from the perspective of celestial observers, and many of its concepts changed the way that I thought about things. It tells you celestial observers don't find humor in tragedy. Right, and that changed the way that I thought about it. He says, "You humans, people, we think about tragedy. It makes us laugh, right? We go, some guy slips in the mud. Angels don't find any humor in tragedy, but what they do find humor in is our anxiety. Like when we're worried, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Because it says clearly, they, through the observation of so much time, know that God always turns everything to good. So whatever situation you find yourself in and you're worried, right, God will turn that into your fortune, right? And so the angels laugh when you get worried. And that messed me up for so long. I was like, I get worried, these angels all that just messed me up, you know. It's great.
I like that. So let's go over some of the main points that the Urantia book might have thoughts on and your interpretation of it. So what does the Urantia book say about God? Like, what is God, or what does it tell you about God? What do you learn about God from it?
So the Urantia book says that God is a personality. God is the ultimate personality, the first personality, the perfected personality. And explains that God is not in the business and no respecter of persons, that God created persons, that each one of us through our personality now is a reflection of God's ultimate personality and in the fabric of personality existing because of him. And that God exists outside of the creation, and that at any time, now I'm trying to stick to the book as closely as possible here, so I'm just trying to tell you what the book is saying. At any time, God can interact with his creation in any way, shape, or form. Is typically not in the habit of directly affecting creatures in the material realm on the evolutionary plane. That he has and can at any time, but is not in the habit of taking a being that is on the first steps of life emerging intellect into spiritual development, right? The development of spirit. So it places our spiritual development and capacity at the bottom rungs, that it is as low as it can possibly be, and that we're in its earliest stages of development, and that on a planet, as soon as intelligence begins, observation and stewardship begins. As soon as consciousness emerges in any aspect of the animal life on a planet, right? And then it begins to foster it through a natural progress to the evolutionary ascendant ladder, right? It describes. So God is about letting that process happen, typically, naturally, but at any time can intercede it. Says that God spiritually is so different from us in his personality that were we to be instantly transported into the presence of God, we would then and there be just as unaware of God as we are now. That we do not have the capacity to even understand fundamentally any aspect of God's full existence at all. that the best they can do for us, and it's really a great chapter in the book. It's like it's like the first, I'd say, 2 or 3 papers really deep dives into the nature and personality and God's relation to the individual, God's relation to the universe. These first 4 or 5 papers of the book, the hardest to read, but they really sink the deepest as far as somebody being so arrogant, so egotistical to think that they could describe the nature of God. They could describe the personality of God. They could describe the relation of God to you, right? And for any book or person to think that they can do that is a grand statement. It's like it's a big task, right? And I think the book handles it well. I think the book handles it in a way that is respectful, is adoring, is understands that God has many names throughout all time and space. The Father, the One, the Source, the Creator, and that there are so many different universes of intelligent, living, spiritual beings that we can't comprehend it. God is the controller and creator of all that. So, and we're inside of that at the very bottom rung. You know.
Wow. So next question would be, what does the Urantia book have to say about Jesus?
The Urantia book lays out a very clear, defined hierarchy that God singularly emerged out of theoretical existence of nothing into being, then the spiritual Trinity begins to emerge, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And that these 3 things emerge together, and that they are actually individual personalities, real, true personalities that exist at the central core of all things. And that echoing out from that, they also have sons and daughters that have emerged through the either creation, either been directly created, or they have literally ascended through some material realm of time and space to that point where they are a ascended creator or Trinity, son, daughter of God. And so in this level, Jesus is in the hierarchy a creator son of God, meaning that Jesus is a spiritual personality before he comes here that is about creating personalities and creating the material world that we see. So he's a creator son. So he came into this place and created everything that we see, right? And that is his purpose. That is his spot in the hierarchy, that he created everything that we see. And that there are many different aspects in the hierarchy with their different positions all the way to reaching it. It's very vast, and Jesus is a creator, and I think that, to sum it up, I think that Lucifer, it goes over Lucifer's argument in the Urantia book against Jesus, and they call Jesus Christ Michael of Nebadon, and they say that Jesus' name was Joshua ben Joseph, and that he was born to Mary and Joseph, that it was an immaculate conception, that it was a total miracle. They confirm many of the biblical miracles happening, some to greater and lesser degrees, saying many were not even recorded. It says that Jesus was about here on purpose to spiritually uplift the planet, because it was at a particularly degrading level of carnality because of the Lucifer rebellion. So when you talk about who Jesus is from the Urantia's point of view, it is particularly important to talk about Lucifer and the Caligastia and their rebellion, that they were initially placed as the sovereigns of our local universe and the development of intellectual life inside of it. That they, and then convinced many of their followers to fall and betray the central paradises where they initially came from, and that's the abode of Christ Michael of Nebadon. That's the creator. And so I'm just trying to describe the Urantia book's vast description of who Jesus is. So in coming here, right, Lucifer had rebelled against Christ Michael saying that you are not my God. You are my creator, and I accept that you are my creator, but there is no God. That reincarnation is a natural process, and that Christ Michael is actually is the only person that stops that natural process, because he has what you would call people who are called ancients of days or executioners of days. That these beings are his subordinate servants, and that they can kill a person where they never come back. Their soul does not reincarnate. And that the only function that stops the natural reincarnation is Christ Michael and his Ancients of Days. And that's why he's rebelling, is because he says that to do that is a tragedy and a travesty against life and existence. That to stop someone's reincarnation cycle is the only sin that a person can actually make. That's Lucifer's argument against Nebdon. So Christ Michael comes to Earth in the book, and his way of defeating what's happening here was to spiritually uplift people's way of thinking and treating each other. And that was his job. That was his mission. Yeah. And that typically I'm sorry, I know I paused there for a second, and it's typically that there are many beings in function and purpose that are attempting to spiritually uplift all the different evolutionary planets throughout all time and space. And it speculates, at the time that this book is written, that he told his followers that he would return here someday, and so the book believes that he will, but they don't know when, because of the vast amount of things they're always undertaking. Like the things, like we think, oh, he's going to come back and help us. Meanwhile, he's literally like fighting a whole horde of goblin orcs with a sword by himself on a mountain right now in another universe. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know the tasks that they're undertaking in other places. You know what I mean? To try to help other people as well. So it's interesting takeover from the book.
Absolutely. So I know that the Urantia book also talks about the Lucifer rebellion, and we were talking about that yesterday. And this is, so what does the Urantia book say about like Lucifer and this rebellion?
That Lucifer was a non-Linendexed son of God, is what it says. So basically, he was still in the process of ascending towards and getting to meet God, and that he had been selected after a lot of trial and oversight to be the sovereign overcarer of this local universe, and that he was one of the most beautiful and diligent and dedicated angels for eons and eons and eons of time. And the fact that he came and got this far away from the central abodes, and it speculates that at some point it talks about poison taking hold in the personality of a mind, that betrayal and pride being basically a tumor that can grow inside of a personality, and that Lucifer succumbed to this tumor of pride, that he was actually, in fact, able to declare himself God because he could. That was his argument, and the final thing, that he could declare himself the ruler and God of this universe because he could. That was his argument. So it was pretty interesting, and kind of plays himself off as actually the good guy in the situation. His argument is obviously that he is the righteous one and trying to protect the suffering souls. Says that there is no point in this ladder of life that we're doing, in this ascendant path, that people are suffering for nothing, that there is nothing at the end of the path, and it's all horseshit and a big Ponzi scam by the Ancients of Days and Christ of Michael. That's his argument, and he's apparently the one that's in charge of our entire local universe, which is titled Satania. So our planet is called Urantia in the book, and we are inside the Satania universe, and he is on the planet of Satan, or Satania, or something like that. And so he has his own planet on another star where there is intelligent life living, and he is living there right now. Amen. And I guess the way it's described is everything goes in a cycle, so you're like on this pattern as you're going back to the source. Everything's sucking you back towards God as you're all the way out here on the furthest reaches of time and space. That and you know, physics would seem to indicate that, because it's not an explosion; it's like an implosion, enveloping and sucking itself back in. All of everything is kind of just, pushing out and eating in all at the same time.
Tio, my last question before we open it up for audience questions, I think, is, does the Urantia book say anything about the events of Revelation, or like end times prophecy, or like what's going to happen in the future?
The Urantia book pretty clearly defines modern Christianity as a dogmatic, off-the-road 4x4 adventure from Pauline Christianity. That the book, just to sum up, I think the book's take on that sentence again, the book says that the Apostle Paul would roll in his grave if he could find out that they put his letters together and revered his writings as the written word of God. That he would literally strip his clothes off and beat himself to death if he found that out. That's what the book says. So it sounds pretty rational to me, As a Jew, as a person who would obviously not want to be venerated, he is the most venerated person in the Christian faith. Apostle Paul, wrote so much of the New Testament, and you have people who are uneducated walking around saying that's the word of God. So the Urantia book pretty much clearly states that he would tear his beard out.
Well, I think that's probably true, and it's a misunderstanding when people think that the Bible is the Word of God in a direct sense, especially, no, the whole Bible. None of it is supposed to be understood as the Word of God in a direct sense, and I say that as a Christian. That's not what it is, right? So Paul wrote letters, right? He wrote letter to the Colossians, letter to the Romans. I know you know this already, but letter to the Philippians. He was writing letters to the early church and being like, hey, my brother in Christ, I hope you guys are doing good over there. Try and keep in mind, think about God. And he was giving them advice, but he was a human being writing a letter to other human beings. And the Old Testament was human beings recording histories and other things. So unlike the Muslims, our holy book is not intended to be the word of God, and that is literally a misunderstanding. But it's God breathed, which is a different thing. But everything is God breathed, But in any case, so are you saying there is no prophecies about the future in the Urantia book? Does it say anything about, is Jesus coming back or anything like that?
It stays pretty fundamental in protecting the reader from accepting that kind of thing. Jesus says that any man who declares he knows the day is a liar, and no person knows. It backs that whole thing up pretty hard, as to not allow you to get lost in dogma. One of the things about the book is, as heretical and dogmatic as the book itself might eventually be, it attempts to persuade an intellectual person from ever making that mistake. And I think that as far as revelations and any kind of prophecy or any kind of divination of the future, it is not acceptive of that kind of ideology. It straight up shuts that down, almost as if it was a preacher talking to you and he's telling you, no, that's not good for you. No, don't do that. It could come tomorrow. It could come tonight. It could be 1,000 years, the book says. You don't know. We don't know. It does state some things that are prophetic. I think, which is kind of funny, from reading the book, the average person might not catch these prophetic statements, but it says that the Urantia book will be extremely popular in 1,000 years on Earth. So that, to me, right there says, oh, well, that's a statement of prophecy. You know what I mean? That's saying that nothing exciting is going to happen for 1,000 years. People are supposed to be chilling, and eventually the book's going to become popular, right?
Very interesting. So thank you for that introduction to the subject. And I just want to ask, does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments for Tio? I have plenty more questions, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask anything you wanted to. If not, Tio, like, what does the Urantia book say about actual space and aliens and like the science fiction type aspect? Because the Urantia book sort of has the reputation of being like a science fiction book or like a space Bible. Not science fiction, but like it's about space and aliens in some sense. That was the impression I got even when I was like, oh, it's like a space Bible. Like it has like a sense of being like a cosmic. So what does it say about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the book tries to break your conception a little bit of alien life only existing in the material sense, so that it tries to say that we are already in the book in this spiritual channeling way at all times surrounded by alien life. That the books make statements that at many times in like the trying moments of our life, we are surrounded by celestial hosts and observers waiting in function, right? Waiting in purpose. They have functions that they're serving. And that each person, when they hit to a certain point in their psychological development of their personality, will immediately be given a like troop of celestial beings that are there to protect them and guide them to the rest of their process to save their personality. In the event that they have some kind of painfully terrible, awful, gruesome death, that they have a function to pull the intelligence and the persona out and to carefully save it from the experience, right? And it talks about those kind of functions, about saving the personality. So, as alien life is all around us, right? It talks about the stars, the planets, the energy between that, all having sentience that we can't understand, and that each star and different comets that are moving are all there in function to protect us, and that God has this like overarching system in place. So when I hear that he's like saying like stars are there, and the book says clearly that the star is an advanced personality that ascended through time, and God made it a star, right? So it's servant of God, it's a star. It's there, and what is the function of that star? To protect that place where it's at. It's a protector of that area. What is it protecting from, right? That's so when you ask me, is there aliens? I'm thinking, there must be, even from this book, there must be something it doesn't want to clearly tell us that it's, God is protecting you from something with these stars. These stars are there protecting you. What is it protecting us if you don't want to know? Like, I imagine that, and the book clearly does state that it's not going to give us any new revelatory ideas. So imagine if there was a holy war continually going on where the forces of evil and light were constantly at odds, and that the stars and our sun is literally our protector, right? It's protecting us at all times, so nothing can come close to us. Certain things, evil aliens, evil sentient things can't even come close to us or can't affect with us. It's an interesting subject because we can only perceive of things from our interaction with it. It clearly states that it is outside of our comprehension. So what that means to me is I'm constantly trying to break it. I'm trying to push on it. Well, how can I not conceive of it? In what way would it break? How can I start to push on the boundaries of understanding it? And the book emphatically states that in our current state, that it's not comprehensible to us. That's always blown my mind. And this is speaking directly to your question about alien life and alien interactions, that it is outside of our capacity to understand, that it could be right in front of us and we wouldn't see it. That's the book's take on it.
I've got a question about, basically I'm looking for your interpretation or your understanding of the concept of thought adjusters. I've only read a little bit of the Urantia papers, different ones here and there. And that idea, I kind of thought maybe it was something like the higher self. What do you think it is? Like the oversoul or thought adjuster?
That was the word I was looking for. Thank you. Earlier, the thought adjuster is like what I would describe as is easily conveyable to as like a conscious, right? It's your conscious, and but not to be said just as lightly as that either. Is a sentient being that exists with you. You are given a thought adjuster. Each person gets one at a certain age, 7, 8, 9. They have this thought adjuster that comes in their life that attempts to persuade them to the right pathway of things, right? To guide them in life. People who listen to the thought adjuster end up eventually melding with it, becoming one, right? Because if you listen to this thing that's telling you what to do, right? If you do what it's telling you, it has an easier ability to meld with you upon death. Then that is, from the book's description, how you survive this experience. The only way to get off this planet here is to listen to that consciousness. That's the book's take. And the consciousness is easily definable as always good. It's always benevolent and good. It's always wanting the best for you and for other people. It is never evil, right? It is never... because the book obviously states that there are outer forces that are trying to persuade you. So it is your good aid, right? It's your spiritual aid. And I think that it talks about it's important that what happens when a person doesn't meld with their thought, just that they become so far depraved or lewd or whatever the action, just completely unredeemable, that the thought adjuster begins a process in heaven to abandon you. And it goes through a legal process. And once the legal process is over, you are abandoned. Will continue through the thralls of your life, functioning just as if you were before. You get to make your choices, whatever, but there is no life for you after that. So it is a being that is there, stuck with you for all extensive purposes. And at any point that it doesn't, the melding process won't happen, you're not listening, it can abandon ship. Right? And so that kind of adds to the idea that some people talk about. Some people seem just like character actors in a show where they just can't change. They just can't ever be anything but the same awful kind of person, you know?
Thank you.
Fascinating. Does anyone else have a question about the Urantia book or a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. So what does the Urantia book say about the concept of hell?
I do not believe that the Urantia book has any conception of torture or hell or any malevolence whatsoever attached to what happens after this. That is an entire fabrication. And instead, I think that the Urantia book teaches more an aspect of annihilation, kind of like I was alluding to a second ago, where you either want to endure and exist, and you do, or you do not want to endure, exist, and these things are on a scale of time inevitably self-destructive to the core of it. And that's it. The book does not banter. It does not care about your feelings in this regard. It says you either become benevolent and good and get to live, or that's it. You're gone. There's no torture. There's no that type of personality on a scale of time will eventually snuff out. That there is no survival there.
One follow-up question. You said that sometimes the melding happens at different ages, like 6, 7, or 8. What happens if someone dies before the melding? Like a child dies at 5?
The book is, I want to say that it has some different takes on that. I'm not sure if it goes into it too much, like those hard-line questions like that, Hermes. But I want to say, if I remember correctly, that you are taken to a place where you are given the ability to have your life again. But it's not like here, but that your parents who lost you, because it's all connected. So not only did you die at 7, but also you had parents who had to deal with the fact that they had a child who died at 7, right? So there's 2 or 3 personalities there who, in the span of time, crying out for justice would be there, right? 3, not just one person died. So there is a place where that is allowed to function naturally together again. I think that's the take of the book.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, that God makes it right. That's why earlier it said that angels laugh at our anxiety. Like when we're worried, they just freak out because they, on the outside, not knowing death, observe the causality, meaning A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So they saw that G, that beautiful note there, right, start all the way over here at A. And in the middle, there was all this chaos, right? And C's over here freaking out. Am I alone? What's happening to me? But the angels see the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And they see C and E freaking out there in the middle, and they laugh about it, apparently. And because they've had the observation of so much time that nothing ever doesn't work out for the best. That's a direct statement from what you might call an angel. So every paper in the book is claimed to be written by a spiritual personality, by a divine counselor of Havona in the 32nd spiritual circuit of Nebadon. You know what I mean? Each one, he'll tell you who he is. And I think that their take on it is really interesting, that, trauma is not funny. Your anxiety is funny.
What is Nebadon?
Nebadon would be the I want to say Nebadon is the central isles of paradise of our local universe. So it's the place where Christ Michael resides and lives. It's the main hub of our local universe, which is just part of the grand universe. Like, this is nothing, basically, the book describes.
One thing that's interesting is it's Christ Michael, so there's an esoteric teaching that Michael and Christ are either the same or so profoundly connected as to be the same, but basically the same, as though the Archangel Michael and Jesus are actually one and the same entity. And in Gematria, Jesus equals I am Michael, and Michael equals I am Jesus, which is interesting. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the Urantia book?
You were mentioning something about having to go to court, or the thought adjuster will do some legal action. Are certain laws really strictly enforced or something? Is there a set of lawyers or something?
I guess apparently it's when a personality reaches a state that they consider as beyond redemption. And this is really interesting, and it could kind of change the way that I looked at things, is that what is a personality if you make it, if you mold it yourself, right? If you're on that side, if you force it to be something that it's not, what is it in the end? You've effectively killed the person anyway, right? And so in the book, I think that the book more leans to the idea that they will take this personality, and whatever was there before will be so effectively gone that even if the being is still alive, the spiritual container is there, the person that's there is so different that whoever was there before is effectively annihilated, gone. And so I think that the book makes that very clear, that it doesn't necessarily have death, but they can change you in such a way as to make you an immediate servant, right? And so if you're an immediate just robot, beep, 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 yes, sir, what can I get you? Would you like some hamburgers today? And you turn back and go back in your closet, you shut the door, right? And then they press a button on the wall, you come walking back out, right? How much of a person are you, right? The more interaction that you have with a personality from a creator and outside perspective, the more like you that personality becomes. That's the more robotic it becomes. So from a human perspective, when we're looking at creating robotics and artificial intelligence, the real problem with artificial intelligence is that every time we get closer to it, it just becomes simple robotics. You know, when Alexa came out, that was breaking. It was, oh my gosh, she's going to help me do everything. Now it's a joke. That's so simple. The guys who made that are off to way bigger and better things. But it's still just simple robotics. There is no such thing as true artificial intelligence yet. And so in that same way, as we try to understand what makes it different, what makes it truly artificial, understand it's the separation from us, right? It's that it's not a product of our will. We're not making it do everything that we want. Then it becomes artificial, it becomes sentient, it becomes its own little thing, right? And I think that when you look at us like that, when you look at us and you look at these thought adjusters and these things interacting with us, they're in the process of trying to make us salvageable, right? They're like, oh, please be something I can pull out of this mess and add to, you know what I mean? I want to try to salvage as much of you and your experience as possible without having to tear it away. Now, let me explain. So you get up to heaven, and 40% of you is horror films, CSI, murder shows, and just the terrible nightmares you have that somebody's going to come in your house and stab you. God immediately comes in and goes, that's all gone. None of that allowed here. No more murder. No more murder movies. That's all bad. It's bad for your brain. Stop it, right? So you've got 60% of your personality left, right? Well, what happens when 90% of your personality has to just be slapped into the ether, right? Hot Pockets, video games, things that are of the material world. What are you pursuing? How much of you has manifested characteristics of loyalty, love, compassion, and the capacity for those inside of your personality? So that way when you go to a new experience, you can be like, oh, I had that experience there. That's part of me. Yes, I'm now this consistent person emerging into, what is this? Is this Havona? Oh, what am I going to do here now, right? You can move on, right? You don't allow these things to become the fabric of yourself. But I have a person in my life who won't stop talking about Google hacking her email for 14 years. She's completely obsessed. She spends 19 hours a day on the phone with technicians making their life miserable because Google hacked her email, and she's completely delusional, and she spends 19 hours a day. What happens when she gets to heaven, man? Who is she? I don't even know, because for 19 years, this person has been the crazy Gmail email lady. That's all she talks about, right? So the book and your thought adjuster and all these things and these functions going about this process of trying to help you, I think there's consequences. I think the book doesn't banter. It doesn't have soft feelings in that regard. If you're not making of yourself something that can endure time, it's on you.
So I understood a little bit of what you were saying with the legal system, almost as if there were a specific, really strongly adhered to type of structural system that everything is governed by. Is that the case that you got from the Urantia book?
Oh, that's absolutely right. Yeah, let me see here.
For example, I remember also reading a little bit about the life of Jesus, right? And why his family, why Mary and Joseph were each chosen to have him raised by those people, right? Their lines and all that stuff. And I think that other people are like that or something. Do you know more? Can you elaborate on that section of Jesus' life and the reasons why they specifically chose each one of those families? Do you remember?
Yeah, the book talks about Jesus personally selecting where he would come out into the world. It's very hard to give a summary on something that doesn't waste any any breath here. But so we'll just go directly to paper 122, and we'll just take a good look at what you're talking about here. So, just so we get an idea of the actual book's way of speaking, right? We get a little out of my layman way here. And so here we go. So this is Joseph and Mary, right? His parents. You asked about this, why they were chosen. So Joseph, the human father of Jesus, was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, albeit he carried many non-Jewish racial strains which had been added to his ancestral tree from time to time by the female lines of his progenitors. The ancestry of the father of Jesus went back to the days of Abraham, and through this venerable patriarch to the earlier lines of inheritance, leading to the Sumerians and Nodites, and through the southern tribes of the ancient blue man, to Adon and Phonta. David and Solomon were not in the direct line of Joseph's ancestry, and neither did Joseph's lineage go back directly to Adam. Right, and then I'm going to skip a little bit here. Mary, the earth mother of Jesus, was a descendant of a long line of unique ancestors, embracing many of the most remarkable women in the racial history of Urantia. Although Mary was an average woman of her day and generation, possessing a fairly normal temperament, she reckoned among her ancestors such well-known women as Anan, Tamar, Ruth, Bathsheba, Anzi, Chloe, Eve, Anita, and Rada. So basically what the book says here is that both Joseph and Mary are directly connected in many ways to the Hebrew bloodlines, right? And it also states that he's a natural born son of Mary and Joseph, right? I think earlier I said that it was an immaculate conception. I remember now that's not true. The book states that he was a natural born son of Mary and Joseph, that the Spirit entered into him at the age of 33.
I have two questions. They're connected. One is there any test that you can do that would tell you if your thought controller left, or thought whatever? Sorry. Is there like any way to verify that? And then the second question is the whole reincarnation thing that Lucifer was talking about. If that person abandoned you, would you still have reincarnation, or is it like total fucking annihilation?
I think that from my personal perspective, the way the world is now, most people that you've met in your life, if not all of them, are past the point of melding with their personality, with their thought adjuster, as they are well into the like being escorted through the process and just going through the process. But the fact that you have the ability to ask that question from the Urantia Book standards, I think would mean that you are not beyond redemption. The book is not harsh. The book is not. All the book asks, all God from the book's statement, all God asks of you is just to keep trying, right? To keep wanting to improve, to keep wanting to be a better person, to enjoy life, to be the type of person that is fixable, right? Like, challenge yourself to be the type of person that is fixable. So when you ask that question, I think that alone, like that kind of, do you understand what I'm saying? If you care, did I lose him? You haven't lost him yet, right? So the book makes a statement that when a personality is beyond salvation, it has gone very, very far. I don't know if we've ever actually met anyone in our lifetime that would fit that narrative. I don't believe I have. I don't believe I've ever met anyone who didn't have a soul.
I see. And what about the reincarnation thing that the Lucifer was talking about?
Yeah, that's absolutely wild, but it's not outside of what the book is already saying, right? That you die and reincarnate into a different form just outside of here in a realm that is existing outside of what we can see and comprehend. So he's saying that's a natural process, right? That process is natural. Now, it's not necessarily saying that we reincarnate again and again, like here. Like, I'm just going to come back as Bob in 20 years or whatever. But that every time you die, it continues. You go on and on and on, right? It just continues going on. And that the only people that stop that are the executioners of the Ancients of Days. And basically that the central isles of paradise, Havona, the main circuit of paradise and God of the central isles, maintains that perfection, because in those realities, if you have a thought that goes against God, that's not you cease to exist. Right? You instantly cease to exist, and the book goes through this in the paper. So it's like we're very fortunate here that we're able to just like blunder through life. Meanwhile, in another spirituality, if a personality does not do the will of God, he ceases to exist instantly and is gone forever. Shoof, gone. And that's through the process of these executioners of the Ancients of Days, that they get tried for something they did. You knew the rules. You were well informed. You knew the rules when you were allowed in here. Now you're punished. You betrayed us. Gone. So it's very harsh. And I've always said that I believe personally, if you read the Bible, God seems like a gangster to me. Right? And in that same way, it's very hierarchical, right? A king, like somebody who is not playing around. This is not a joke. You know, you are not going to disobey me. What happens if I disobey you, huh? Gone. Right? That because what happens is that would mess up the stability of that place, right? The way it stays perfect is everyone's alignment and agreement and unison in one. The second that one thing changes, God smacks it right away. It's gone, snipped. And it says that angels actually have the ability to go against the will of God around us. That at times, angels have functionally sacrificed their existence and lives to help a human being. And that in doing so, they cease to exist instantly, and that the other angels are only able to observe the function of what happened because of the absence of the personality. That's it. They don't know. It's such a conundrum against the will of the universe that they cease to exist.
What is... sorry, I'm bombarding you with questions. What is your take on free will? And just a little thing that I want to add is recently I was watching some fan fiction about a cartoon, and in it, it was like if the angel, defies the will of the grand priest, which is like this hierarchical thing, immediately it would disappear from existence. So I think that's an interesting coincidence that I was watching that just a couple days ago.
Me personally, my personal feelings on free will would be different from I think what the book says free will is. So, free will from the book standard is like, we are in a process of a natural thing, that no one is held to a high standard stuck into their process, except for that they be benevolent in the ability to try to change and adapt through the situation, and that if you're not those things, that they're self-destructive of their own doing. That they are of themselves something that will not survive. That God doesn't have to do anything to make that personality stop to exist. Right? It does it on its own. And so when we talk about free will, from my point of view, I don't personally. I believe that God is sovereign and that God, everything is God's will. Every single thing. And I think the second you say you have free will, I think that you have responsibility. And you take responsibility not just for your life, but everything that happens after that. Not just in your life, but everyone else too. Now you're responsible. You're your own God. I don't like that. I'm not responsible for none of this. If God comes tomorrow and shows up, I'm going to tell him I have no idea what's happening here.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. Great questions, great content. Does anyone else have a question or comment for Tios or for the Urantia book while we're on this subject?
Yeah, I know you were looking something up when I was asking about the structure and how everything seems like it's extremely, like almost as if it's like a rigid, very well-structured system in place for all of existence, I guess, right?
Right. I was pulling up the personality survival. This is my least favorite paper in the book because this is I think the one paper in the book where it does talk about the permanency of death in the book's conception. Excuse me. So I'm here at paper 112 of personality survival, and let's just go over a couple points here that it talks about. 14 points of personality it has. These are great here. Now, one, personality is that quality in reality which is bestowed by the universal Father himself, or by the conjoint actor acting for the Father. 2, it may be bestowed upon any living energy system which includes mind or spirit. 3, it is not wholly subject to the fetters of antecedent causation. It is relatively creative or co-creative. When bestowed upon evolutionary material creatures, it causes spirit to strive for the mastery of energy matter through the meditation of mind. Personality, while devoid of identity, can unify the identity of any living energy system. Right? That's a great one. I like that. It discloses only qualitative responses to the personality circuit in contradistinction to the three energies which show both qualitative and quantitative responses to gravity. Personality is changeless in the presence of change. It can make a gift to God, dedication of their free will to the doing of the will of God. So 8, personality can make a gift to God, right? Dedicating their will to doing the will of God. That's something a personality has the ability to do. 9, it's characterized by the morality, awareness of relativity, of relationship with other persons. I wanted to find the phenomenon of death here. This is great. So this kind of speaks a little bit more directly to your question here, Gasheka. So this is actually a great chapter here. The adjuster fusion is something we were talking about directly from this paper. The thought adjuster's fusion imparts internal actualities to personality, which were previously only potential. So that's what I was talking about. This thought adjuster imparts eternal actualities. So it's the container for your eternal actualities, right? It imparts internal actualities to personality, to us. So it's waiting to catch us, right?
Fascinating stuff. So I do want to say this. So I'm going to do a Urantia book reading. I think it's worthwhile to do that. And when I say that, I mean listen together events one chapter at a time, beginning to end on the server. I'm going to do it every day, one chapter at a time. Anyone who can join me, please do. We'll listen together in the audiobook listening channel, and we'll go through it, and we'll do more episodes where we discuss it as we go along. I think that'll be very much worthwhile, just like we've been doing that with the Apocrypha and the Gnostic Gospels. This has been a great conversation, Tios. One last chance. Does anyone have a final question before we start closing up? Tios, thank you so much. So if someone were, two questions. So first, what is the takeaway message that you think the Urantia book has for humanity that you think is most important? Like, what is the main message that the Urantia book is bringing to people? Like the main message to humanity.
The Urantia book's main message is to, I think, open up your mind, be open to read new information, to change your perspective on things. And then eventually, right through that opening perspective, it takes you all the way to the life of Jesus and how he lived his life, being the pinnacle of all the models of human living. That the best thing you can do is strive to help other people, to be there for other people, and to sacrifice yourself for them in this most epic and driven way. And I think that. If a person wants to read the book, they can go to urantia.org. I'm definitely not a paid representative of the organization, and I wouldn't call myself a universalist or a Urantia book believer. But I think that the book is mind blowing, and it's great exercise of changing the way that you perceive things, so that when you encounter this kind of information, it's not so overwhelming because it's so difficult to read that. Because it's introducing so many new concepts, it's so alien, it's so easy to immediately dismiss it and to be afraid of being called a heretic or being dogmatic. But I think the book teaches you to remain open. It's very against dogma. It's very against becoming concrete on these things and not being open for the future and open for new things to come.
Thank you. And I just like to say, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's not that much stuff that I would recommend as you should listen to this. I would say the Urantia Book is worth checking out. It's pretty interesting. I've studied a lot of things, and my impression is this stands out among a lot of things that are in a similar category.
And I would like, if I could, I'd give a little reading here, like my favorite readings from the book, and just it would totally, I think, give a pivot to the type of difference you can get in the book from what we've been talking about. So my favorite paper is paper 196. It's the faith of Jesus, and I go down here a little bit, and I'm going to read this to you. So, Jesus brought to God, as a man of the realm, the greatest of all offerings, the consecration and dedication of his own will to the majestic service of doing the divine will. And Jesus always and consistently interpreted religion wholly in the terms of the Father's will. And when you study the career of the Master as concerns prayer or any other feature of the religious life, look not so much for what he taught as for what he did. Jesus never prayed as a religious duty. To him, prayer was a sincere expression of spiritual attitude, a declaration of soul loyalty, a recital of personal devotion, of thanksgiving, an avoidance of an emotional tension, and a prevention of conflict, an exaltation of intellection, an embodiment of desire, and a vindication of moral decision, an enrichment of thought, and an invigoration of higher inclinations, a consecration of impulse, and a clarification of viewpoint, a declaration of faith, and a transcendent surrender of will, a sublime assertion of confidence, a revelation of courage, and a proclamation of discovery, a confession of supreme devotion and the validation of consecration, a technique for the adjustment of difficulties, and the mighty mobilization of the combined soul powers to withstand all human tendencies towards selfishness, evil, and sin. He lives just such a life of prayerful consecration to the doing of his Father's will, and ended his life triumphantly with such a prayer. The secret of his unparalleled religious life was this consciousness of the presence of God, and he obtained it by intelligent prayer and sincere worship, unbroken communion with God, and not by leadings, voices, visions, or extraordinary religious practices.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, maybe we'll make this the first in a series. Maybe we'll aim to do a trilogy of events about the Urantia Book, and we will do listen together events. Maybe say a week of listen together events. We'll do 7 readings, and then we'll do an event, and we'll do something like that. That'd be cool if you're down for that. But thank you so much, Tio. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this meeting of the Temple Mount podcast on the Temple Mount Discord server. And I do recommend that you check out the Urantia Book. I think it is interesting and unique, and that's coming from someone who's looked into a lot of things. There's something special about it, so check it out. That being said, God bless. Let's jump to the Templar Tavern for the remainder of the... Thank you.